Is Botswana's new leadership breaking the mold? Like its powerful neighbor South Africa, a one-party grip was lost in recent elections. So with a human rights lawyer now firmly in charge in Gaborone, can diamond riches cure the curse of inequality or become a liability? And what example does President Duma Boko set for the continent? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's Newsmaker is Botswana. In spite of being the world's biggest diamond producer, you don't hear much about Botswana. That's mostly because instead of suffering a curse from its natural resources, it's one of the most stable and least corrupt countries in Africa. But even though it's had a thriving multi-party democracy since its independence, the same party remained in power for 58 years. And under that leadership, Botswana saw stability, but it remains one of the most unequal countries in the world. Enter new president and human rights lawyer Duma Boko, who's pledged to change that. Here's a look.
I, Duma Boko.
This moment marks a historic shift in Botswana. In the October elections, Duma Boko ended the Botswana Democratic Party's nearly six-decade rule since independence. The human rights lawyer turned politician founded the opposition coalition Umbrella for Democratic Change in 2012. After contesting two previous elections, Boko finally got to office, pledging to bring change. Botswana has often been dubbed one of Africa's great success stories, yet the slowing economy has taken a toll on people. After Boko's landslide victory, his supporters on the street were hopeful.
I am happy that we have changed the government, because we were unhappy because of unemployment. We are looking forward to seeing what the new government will do for us.
Botswana's GDP per capita is the second highest on the continent. For years, it's been Africa's least corrupt country and a well-functioning democracy. Yet the BDP's last years were marred by accusations of human rights violations and corruption scandals. Unemployment has reached 27%, and inequality and poverty have worsened. Now Boko wants to elevate the country to the next level.
What they want is high-speed internet, not today, yesterday. What they want are jobs. They want opportunities. They want improved livelihoods. And they want governments that deliver this with them on board. And so the so-called liberation parties did the best they could to liberate their countries. And the question is whether they have been able to deliver the kind of progress, the kind of sustainable economic development that meets the needs and demands of this youthful population.
Diamonds are the lifeblood of that economy, as around 80% of Botswana's export revenues come from the precious stone. It's also the world's top producer, yet the fall in global diamond prices has hit the country's economy as more affordable lab-grown diamonds are entering the market. For years, it earned a small share from its diamond sales to its main partner, De Beers. Boko has recently struck an agreement with the company to raise Botswana's share to 50% by the end of this year.
We need, as countries that are reliant on mining to a great extent, to begin to deploy our energies and resources in beneficiation in country. And this is critical because it then enables the country to create jobs and to export finished products. We are looking to power the economy of Botswana. We're looking to diversify it.
These will be crucial for Boko to achieve his ambitious pledges of creating hundreds of thousands of jobs, reducing poverty, and restoring public trust. Boko has achieved the first step of a promised change, but a lot more will be required to shake off 58 years of one-party governance.
So not only is Botswana facing challenges to its primary export, it's also looking at massive aid cuts, with a third of its HIV response programs funded by the United States. So can this new government meet these massive challenges? Well, joining me now from Gaborone is journalist Yvonne Mooka. From London, Senior Research Fellow in at Chatham House's Africa Program, Christopher Vandome. And in the British capital as well, broadcaster and Africa analyst, Thamsanqa Zhou. Thanks all so much for being with me. Yvonne, I'll begin with you in Gaborone. You know, when diamond sales equal 80% of your country's exports and diamonds are a diminishing market, do you think this new leadership is really equipped not just to grow the economy, but to tackle the very severe inequality as they promised?
Yes. Thank you very much for having me. I agree, and I firmly know that this leadership is equipped to grow this economy. 58 years ago, we were led by one-party state, Botswana Democratic Party. We have a new guy called Duma Boko, who comes across as someone who is very passionate about, transforming the economy of Botswana. So right now, he just recently signed a new deal with the BS to ensure that we diversify from just diamonds and we incorporate other sectors of the economy. So yes, I'm confident that the new administration will boost the economy of the country.
Yeah, I'd like to talk more about that De Beers agreement in just a moment. I know it was a bit controversial. There were some questions about what De Beers really did get out of it and if this new deal will benefit Botswanans. But tell me, Yvonne, how and where do you create the actual jobs? They talk about beneficiation and exporting finished products, but what products exactly? Where are the actual jobs going to come from?
We've got 2 days ago, we had a budget speech presentation. So there's some certain areas where they have managed to get other minerals like manganese, somewhere in Kanyu, which is just like 3 hours drive from the capital city. We have other mines that are yet to be opened in the country.
Okay, so mostly in mining you expect the growth. Well, let me ask Christopher if you agree there. Is that where Botswana is going? I've heard a lot of mention of tourism as well, but there's also been some issues in tourism with bushmen being potentially displaced if too much tourism comes into play. So where do you see real room for growth in Botswana?
Look, I think that Yvonne has spelt out quite clearly what we're looking at here, which is a need for diversification away from diamonds. But you've got to remember the figures that you pointed out at the start. Diamonds are so crucial, and there's not going to be one single economic activity that's going to be able to replace the scale of the diamond industry in the long term. So yes, we've got in place a new agreement, and yes, we still have life of mine and new capital investment going into some of those mines. But to try and replace that, or as it winds down, try and find other sectors. Yes, there's copper. Yes, there's manganese and lithium. These are all operating under a kind of legislative framework that was kind of set up for diamonds as the main kind of commodities export. So there's some learning to be done there of how to be able to kind of restructure some of the country's mining strategy. And then you're looking at things like Botswana, which, as you say, that's a really important area because it's bringing in foreign investment and it's bringing in foreign capital. And it's not just kind of domestic economic opportunities that we need to be looking at. It's that replacement of foreign earnings that's going to be really important. At the moment, the Botswana's tourism sector has a reputation for kind of low volume and high value. So kind of people flying in and out of the Okavango Delta and spending large amounts of money. And I think that one of the things that Botswana will be looking at more of is how to diversify its tourism. So you're getting more people coming in to do a range of different activities. But again, there's not going to be one single thing that can replace the scale of the diamond industry. It's going to be about how to harness all of these different activities in order to diversify and grow the economy from here forward.
And do you think they have a strategy to do that? Because can they match the diamond strategy in mining that they've been using that has given a level of prosperity to Botswana, especially compared to other neighbors with resources? Can they manage the same model when it goes into manganese and other styles of mining, or do they risk that same kind of natural resource curse that we've seen in other neighbors? Will it trickle down properly?
Well, I mean, the diamond industry in Botswana is really long-standing, and we've had a partnership between the government and De Beers since the 1960s. And so the agreements and the position of that relationship now is accumulation of decades of relationship between those two entities, resulting in not only the joint venture between the government and De Beers Mining Company in the form of Debswana, which is a public-private partnership, the oldest public-private partnership in the world. But you also have these agreements on what scale of offtake the government is allowed to take, what goes to De Beers in terms of those actual diamonds, what the government can put through other channels. But this has taken a long time to get to this position. So when you look at what other opportunities there are in the mining sector, there are fledgling operations in copper and lithium and manganese, but these are still largely at the kind of exploration stage, or they're at a stage where these deposits, previously weren't economically viable. Now with modern technology, they might be, but we're a long way from seeing the ability to replicate the relationships that have existed in the diamond industry to immediately transpose those into other areas.
Okay, Thamsanqa, I'll come to you in a minute. First, I want to go back to Yvonne. We've been kind of losing your connection, but I had said I wanted to ask about the De Beers deal. And tell us what is really happening with that deal, because both the government and the opposition kind of wanted to take credit for it. But there are still some issues being looked at, mainly complaints that a tax waiver was issued to De Beers in exchange for a bigger share for the government in, again, an industry that's arguably diminishing. Is the Botswanan public truly happy with the deal now that's been cut?
Yes, because this deal started with the former government of the Botswana Democratic Party. So the tussle between the parties is that the current administration wants to take credit. Under the previous government, they wanted 50-50, and the deal just froze like that. So currently, Boko, last week, and the Minister of Minerals and Energy, they signed an agreement without any details, like in particular, how much who's getting what. But from the street, where has it that De Beers is still going to get a lump sum, which we are yet to confirm as journalists because we are carrying out our investigations. But the only details that they have so far released is that De Beers has agreed to sell diamonds.
Okay, we'll have to keep our eye on that. Let me come to Thamsanqa, though, and branch out a little bit, because if you look at the larger picture, right now, especially in southern Africa, you have Botswana, South Africa, and arguably Mozambique voting out parties. I say arguably Mozambique because the election is very much still contested. Voting out the parties that led since independence. And then in Gabon and other, Central and West African countries, we saw leadership overthrown after decades. Is Africa a continent that is now fundamentally changing in the way we're seeing Botswana change?
First of all, thank you for having me. I would argue that that trend in Southern Africa, or what you call the SADC region, which is in the south, the politics there is different. The political parties are different, and you would find that in Angola, in Namibia, in Zimbabwe, and Mozambique. Those countries have been, by and large, been led by political parties that actually fought bitter wars for independence. So the way that it worked is quite different. Although there were problems in Mozambique, it's highly unlikely that Frelimo would be taken out of power. Same as in Zimbabwe, it's unlikely that ZANU-PF would be taken out of power, or ANC, or whatever its versions, even if you include former President Zuma and others. They are combined votes.
But we're seeing a change in the voter pattern, though, in that they are losing their majorities. They're being pushed further out. Go on.
No, I wouldn't think so. I think what you have to look at, in fact, when you look at what happened in Botswana, if you add the BDP party, which is the former party of Kama and others, that has led Botswana from independence. If you add their vote and the votes of those that came from that party, including Ian Khama, Seretse Khama's son, who is former president, if you add their vote, you would find that the total percentage of votes of people that have been voting for these kind of parties is not changing that much. So what happens is the vote is then split, and then you have a new coalition like the UDC that's currently led by President Boko taking over.
Okay.
But I also wanted, yeah, sorry.
No, I was just going to ask Christopher if you have seen the same or you disagree with that analysis.
Yeah, I broadly agree, but I'd nuance it by saying that political transition in Southern Africa, where it is occurring, is largely as a result of the evolution of these political schools of thought that you've seen. So yes, it's correct that, for example, where you've seen the ANC in South Africa get around 40% of the vote, a big dip from its previous results. And yes, opposition parties, particularly the EFF and Umkhonto we Sizwe, yes, they come out of that school of thought and their breakaways from the ANC. But they're parties that, yes, they come out of a former dominant party, but they have very, very different thinking. And it's similar in Namibia with SWAPO, where you're seeing breakaways from SWAPO are going to be the big challenges. And so it varies from country to country.
It seems like it's changing overall, but it's kind of a slow burn as the larger parties fragment and the branch out parties can change the equation. But Christopher, let me stick with you, because I'd mentioned at the top of the show that now Botswana is also facing this cut in funding and how they will have to deal with USAID funding cuts to HIV programs in particular. I mean, Botswana once had the highest HIV infection rate really in the world, but a lot of aid money helped bring that down. Is the government ready to lose what is essentially a third of that funding?
I think that the government's financial position across the board is in a real difficult position at the moment. It's had separate kind of financial buffers that it's been able to use that have been accumulated over time through the benefits of diamond revenues, which during this period of low diamond prices, it has been using to prop up the government spending across a whole range of social programs, and so we're seeing. This is coming at a really bad time for Botswana, because those financial buffers have gone, because the government is now in a position where it's in a much more fragile position than it perhaps has been in the past, especially looking at its kind of wider spending priorities.
Right.
And so, yes, this is going to be a real struggle, particularly given, as you say, the high prevalence of HIV in the country, and some of the other kind of logistical challenges of tackling that, such as kind of low and diffuse populations and where they sit within the country.
Okay, Yvonne, let me get your take then from Botswana itself. Was that a big hit? How did Botswanans feel when they heard that massive cut to the foreign aid that's been such a part of the system now for decades?
PEPFAR has been supporting the Botswana government in the HIV struggle for 20 years. And over 1 million USD has been spent so far. When the executive orders were announced, I did a story, and then I interviewed local NGOs. Immediately, some of them closed down. Up to now, they have closed down. So it's quite a struggle. They are still closed. Those that are promoting or assisting sex workers and orphans with PMTCT, which is the biggest center that provides ARVs in the country. Most of their offices and branches are closed, including the one in the capital city currently. So it's quite a big deal. We've gone back to, people panicking, mental health issues, because there were people that were assisted on a daily basis by PEPFAR through these NGOs. Yeah, so it's quite a struggle. And people have lost jobs, as we know, the issue with USAID.
That really is tragic to hear. I mean, again, is the government, I don't know how the government could have been prepared for that, because it really did take everyone by surprise to hit really the most vulnerable people on the planet. But do you think the government is prepared? Is there a plan B?
That's what they're saying. They're saying that they're looking for alternative measures. The thing with our local NGOs and government is that they were both taking money from the US government. And government, through the Ministry of Health, was distributing the funds to NGOs, at the same time taking a share from the fund. So yesterday, the Minister of Health was on radio talking about that. They're trying to look at alternative measures and how they can assist. It remains to be seen. But to be honest, we are in a panic mode.
Wow. Okay. Thamsanqa, I'll come back to you, and again with a wider question. The president had said in an interview that there were several things he was looking at to help grow the economy. One of them was the African Continental Free Trade Agreement that he was looking forward to, saying that could really help boost landlocked Botswana in particular. Do you see that coming of age anytime soon? And should Botswana really be thinking about a strategy and engaging Greater Africa when it comes to trade?
I think one of the important things to note is that Botswana has got a very small population, although it's a vast country. Most of the country is actually a desert. So when you listen to Finance Minister and Vice President Ndaba, who was schooled in America and worked there, when he talks about probably Botswana anchoring the static region of probably Africa in terms of solar energy, that then can be exported to other parts of Africa as a product, that makes a lot of sense, because they've got vast land and lots of sunshine that can actually be done. Mineral-wise is even part of the problem. I didn't get a chance to chip in, but part of the problem between former President Masisi and De Beers and what the problem is with the current Boko administration with what relates to the diamonds and what De Beers is trying to do is, by and large, they've been doing open cast, which is easy and cheaper to do. But now if they need to go down, they need to invest a lot of money. And the problem that former President Masisi had with De Beers is when you look at the Botswana and maybe the 50-50, and then Botswana itself not participating in the offtake up the value chain, what it then means is you run into problems like what Gekamine in the DRC and other parts of the country, and even in Zambia, fell into, where just the rough diamonds are going to be very cheap. It's going to be very expensive to mine. So if you are not part of the value chain above the pit itself, you are going to be in a mess, and Botswana would risk not getting any money at all. So I think their livestock is huge in Botswana. I haven't heard it mentioned. In terms of farming, livestock is a huge thing. They've got loads of abattoirs. They can export that to not just China or the US, but also to the rest of Africa. So Botswana can position itself, but the biggest problem they have, and what this administration might be making a mistake on, is they've opened up Botswana again to South Africa. And Botswana, for a lot of products that you get in the supermarket, from horticulture to almost everything, they depend on South Africa much as they used to depend on Zimbabwe for services like education and other things. So they need to have that self-sufficient model, which I see a lot of in the budget. But when they open themselves up to a bigger economy like South Africa or even Zimbabwe, then they might run into problem in terms of building that capacity to be a major player in the Africa free trade environment.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, Christopher, we'll finish with that. Just 1 minute left. I mean, it is very hard going up against a competitor in a free trade agreement like South Africa that has really kind of cornered the market when it comes to exports of almost every retail item, not least food. Almost everything you see in the grocery stores in Zimbabwe, in many cases, for example, is from South Africa, and it's difficult to change that dynamic. Could Botswana do it?
Yeah, I think it's got to position itself smartly in the market. I mean, if you look at Northwest Province in South Africa, there's a number of Botswana firms that are there, in particular Choppies, the Botswana supermarket chain. So there is some regional spread. Botswana is now the Secretary General of SADC. And that's part of Botswana's regional economic diplomacy to use those infrastructure corridors, such as the Trans-Kalahari Highway out to Namibia, the new Kazungula Bridge that crosses into Zambia. You can see where Botswana is trying to link itself to its neighbors to try and widen its market. And some of those opportunities are there. But I think, as has been heard, it's got to be a two-way relationship. You know, by kind of protectionism and isolation. Had kind of backfired, particularly with really high prices on certain fruit and vegetables and so on. And so it's a case of how it positions itself in that market and which goods. And I think we heard there from Thamsanqa around beef production and livestock.
Okay. Christopher, that will unfortunately have to be the final word because we are completely out of time for this edition of the Newsmakers. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists sincerely so much for being with us, and our viewers, of course, for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.